There are all kinds of comic book collectors in the world. Some only buy back issues, while others focus on new books. Some are run collectors, while others focus on key issues only. But for most of us, I think we're probably a mixture of a lot of those different things. And with that in mind, I want to share with you my most recent interest, oversized hardcovers. Check it out. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Chris, and this is Northgarden Comics. I have two basic, we'll call them principles, that I try to guide my collecting by. They're not rules by any stretch of the imagination. They're kind of guidelines that things I try to keep in mind as I go about my collecting. One is be patient. There's always going to be another show. There's always going to be another sale. There's always going to be another opportunity to possibly find that book, maybe at a better price and maybe in better condition. Are there exceptions to that? Of course. You have to know when to pull the trigger on a book. If you really want it, you're willing to pay a little bit more, go ahead and get it, right? This is not a rule, but generally speaking, patience tends to pay off when you're trying to get books at a certain price and in a certain condition. The second principle is never say never. I have been bitten by that myself in the past, where I think there's some aspect or way of collecting that I would never do, and then a few months or years down the road, well, wouldn't you know it, I've got an interest in that, and now I'm starting to collect like that. One of those areas has been the whole world of collecting that is the collected editions in the form of oversized hardcovers or omnibus. So those really thick hardcover books that collect like 30 some issues all in one volume for you to read. I have historically been and continue to be primarily a single issue collector. But in the last 6 or so months, I've definitely had my interest piqued by these collected editions. Now, I'm sure some of that is attributed to YouTube, because I've been watching channels like Near Mint Condition and others who focus primarily or almost exclusively on the oversized hardcovers and omnibus, and they just make them look so darn good that it's hard not to start to get some interest in those. But I want to share with you today some of the first volumes that I've gotten as I start to expand my collecting into this new horizon. So in just a minute, we're going to swing the camera around and I'm going to give you a closer look at the first few volumes that I have added to my collection. But first, let me say, if you like this kind of content, please take just a second, hit that YouTube subscribe button. And as you watch, if you see something you like, give it a thumbs up. And of course, always let me know your thoughts, questions, and comments down below. Now, let's go ahead, swing the camera around, and take a look at these oversized hardcovers.
All right, let's go ahead and dive in. Here is my first ever oversized hardcover. This is a collected edition of Transformers. For those of you who've watched any of my videos before, you might say, of course it had to be Transformers. This property is my first love when it comes to comic books. This is the property that got me into collecting back in the 80s, first with the toys, and I of course loved the cartoon show and the animated movie, and then got into the Transformers comics, and then it, led from there into other Marvel books like the X-Men and things like that. So, the rest is history, so to speak, but this is where it all started, and so it seemed only fitting that I would start my journey into the oversized hardcover and omnibus world with some Transformers books. I do have 3 to show you today, and I will say some specific things about these volumes, but I'm also going to use this as an opportunity to speak more broadly about this way of collecting comics into oversized hardcover editions. I'll share some of the things that I've learned so far as I've just begun my journey. I'll share some links down below with some other channels that'll also offer some good resources for those of you who have questions about this and have perhaps considered, branching into some of this type of format in your own collecting. So again, this is Transformers, the IDW collection. This is Phase 2 and Volume 1. And I'll speak more about, why this is Phase 2 and I started there in just a little bit here. But first question I want to answer is kind of the big one, like the why. Why get into the oversized hardcovers to begin with? What is it about this way of collecting that appealed to me? The first thing I'll say about that is it's the oversized nature of the art, that it is larger than your standard comic book. I went and pulled out a standard comic book. Here's Transformers, just a regular single issue, and you can see that the oversized hardcover is taller and wider than your standard comic book, which means that when you get into the book itself, the way of telling this story and showing this story is going to be bigger than your standard comic. And if it's art that you appreciate, making it bigger makes it better in a sense. So the oversized nature of the art was definitely appealing to me. Also the fact that it's a hardcover as opposed to a paperback. There are a number of ways to collect single issues together. The most common is the trade paperback, which usually collects somewhere between 4 or 6 issues. There's also larger collected editions that are also paperback, but I really wanted the hardcover, and that's primarily for the durability, both for just your day-to-day and long-term lower risk of damage to a hardcover. If you read regular books, for example, paperbacks take a beating a whole lot more than hardcovers, especially when you're talking about a book that you may read more than one time. For example, I love the Lord of the Rings trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I have read that story numerous times. I've done most of my reading in paperback format, but here, look, take a look. Here's Fellowship of the Ring. That is pretty beaten for this book because I've read it several times. Now, I don't want this type of damage to happen to my collected comic books. So one reason, hardcover, is less risk of that. You can read this multiple times. The spine will hold up as opposed to that glued, flexible, square-bound paper spine. There's also the fact that when it's even just sitting on the shelf every day and you're taking books out, putting them back on, a paperback has a higher risk of getting dinged or dented, more so than a hardback does. So the hardback, again, gives me that durability just on the shelf above and beyond what a paperback would. There's also, and this would still be true somewhat of a paperback edition, but another reason I was attracted to this was because of the aesthetics. This looks great on your shelf, and we're talking collectors, right? So appearance is important. And I wish it's kind of tactile too. If you could feel this, it's not a texture, but it's very smooth. And there's different, like the Autobot symbol is extra smooth, and some of the different colors and things, very nice. This is a high quality hardcover here, and it's a nice solid spine that they put on this, nice art on the back. So this just looks attractive from the perspective of being a collector. It just looks nice on the shelf as well. So oversized art, the fact that it's a hardcover, and that aesthetic appeal that the oversized hardcover has over just a single issue that'll sit in my short box on my shelf for most of its life. There's also the fact that if I want to easily pull out a story to read, I can just grab this right off my shelf. I don't have to go digging for that short box, find the one that it's in, hunt down the different individual issues. If it's a crossover, maybe I have to go to multiple boxes just to find those different issues, pull them all together, and to read them. Is that a really big problem? No, that's totally first world problem, right? But it's still the benefit of having that all in one bound volume that you can read. One of the next questions that I had to tackle, and I haven't fully answered it yet, so this is still a evolving process for me as a collector, so I don't have this all figured out yet, but the question is, well, what do I buy? I started with Transformers, and because it's a property that I love, but there's so many. Just about every publisher out there has some form of collected edition, oversized hardcover, omnibus, etc. Where do I start? Which properties, which titles, which characters, which creators, which publishers? I mean, that's very subjective, and we each kind of have to come up with that on our own. But for me, I've decided that I'm going to continue to focus primarily on the single issues, but when it comes to these oversized hardcovers, I would look at them for my favorite characters and my favorite stories. And this introduction here with phase 2 of the IDW Transformers represents some of my favorite stories that they have published to date and some of my favorite stories that I've ever read in comics. So that seemed like a really good place to start. But there are others, there's so many others, and you could really get caught up in, there are people who collect only these hardcovers and omnibus and things like that. I'm going to keep a balance, so I have to kind of come up with my own guidelines for what types of things am I going to look for. Otherwise, I could be trying to or wanting to order some of these every single month. Next, I'll say one of the factors is price when it comes to when I buy something or what I buy. I would recommend you never pay cover price for any of these. There are ways to get these where you don't have to buy it at full retail. For example, this Transformers Volume 1 has a cover price of $49.99. Now, you don't have to pay that. If you were to get into this when it was available for pre-order, you could get some kind of discount. Like I've mentioned this in other videos, I order most of my new comic books each month from an online service called DCBS. I'll put a link to their website down below. But one of the things they also do is they have these oversized hardcovers and omnibus when they're available for pre-order. They also have some, it's random, but they'll have a section on their website that's all for in-stock items. And so if they have excess of something, they might have some in inventory right now, and you could order and get that shipped to you, and your discount could be anywhere from 30 to 50% off that retail cover price. There are other websites that, again, I didn't learn these on my own. I have learned from watching other YouTubers like Near Mint Condition, Maddogg Comics, and others. Some of the websites, not all I'm guessing, but some of the websites that are pretty popular for getting collected editions like this at a discount. And it's not just oversized hardcovers and omnibus. They have trade paperbacks and other things like that as well. But I'll put links to those as well down below. One of them is cheapgraphicnovels.com. And then another one is instocktrades.com. InStock Trades, I believe, is owned by the folks at DCBS. And then Cheap Graphic Novels, I don't know, it's just, I think it's just its own thing. But you can get, again, discounted prices. I think there's the option to pre-order when that's available, but there's different options there. So price is definitely a huge thing for me. And what happens, though, if a collected edition goes out of print, it seems like, I'm saying it that way because I haven't tracked this much at all, if you're going to find it once it's out of print, then you're going to have the risk of paying a lot higher price. And that's where I think that guide of be patient comes in. Sometimes they'll do reprints down the road, and so I would try to hang tight rather than paying through the nose and paying cover price or higher for these, when most of the time you can get them at a discounted price. So that's issue number 1, and you can see for these Transformers ones as well, it has one character on the front, and I think it's usually a character that is of primary focus within the stories inside this collected edition. This volume 1 starts with the death of Optimus Prime. It was a one-shot that really kind of kicked off this next phase of storytelling at IDW. And then on the back here, you see there the alt mode for that character that's on the front. It also tells you what it collects inside. This one, for example, collects the one-shot Death of Optimus Prime, and then More Than Meets the Eye, first 5 issues, and Robots in Disguise, the first 6 issues. So this has got 12 issues in it. A lot of the hardcovers I've seen do tend to have more, so 12 isn't really that big, but again, it's still really nice, really pretty. And the other thing I'll say about Transformers, at least, it may be true of other IDW collected editions as well, they try to collect the stories in the best reading order. So not necessarily how they came out, and it'll be in reading order. And I'll show you another example of where that kind of comes up and has an impact on, the table of contents in just a second here. Next up is Transformers. This is Phase 2. This is Volume 3. Now, I know the first question you're going to ask is, wait a second, Chris, what about Volume 2? And that's a very good question. I did actually have volume 2. I purchased that from DCBS, and when it came, I was looking through it, and some of the pages were damaged. There was some wrinkling on about 10 pages, and it even had like near where it was tearing. And I think DCBS, they on their website, they'll say how they don't have, you really have a hard time doing returns with DCBS, at least based on what their policy says. But I emailed them anyway and just explained, hey, I've got this hardcover that I just got. It's got 10 pages. I took pictures of the damage and I emailed that to them. They were very prompt in the response to me. They were apologetic and said, you can ship that back to us. We'll give you a prepaid label. Just ship that back to us. We can give you a full refund. The only thing they could not do in this particular instance was replace it, because that was one of their in-stock items, and either I got the last one, or since I got mine, the rest of them sold out. So they were out of volume 2 at that point. But I did get a shipping label. I did mail that back, and they were very great about getting me a refund. So nothing but good things to say about that experience. Still a bummer that it had those damaged pages, but now as I go to place my next order, I'm going to do it through cheapgraphicnovels.com, and I'm going to get issue 2, before I continue on beyond the ones that I have here. So just to kind of cover off on that, I do want to go in order. Another thing I'll say though about availability here is to answer the question that I posed earlier, why did I start with phase 2? Because that seems to imply that there's a phase 1, and there was a phase 1. Phase 1 was 8 issues, or 8 collected editions, again in reading order, and it started right at the beginning of IDW's tenure with the Transformers property. I haven't started those at all yet because, again, I want to be able to get all of them if I can, and there are at least a few of those volumes that don't seem to be available online anymore for purchase, and so I don't want to just get a partial and then have 3 or 4 out of 8 volumes missing. So I emailed IDW directly and I asked them about the possibility of reprints, or because I had heard from Omar, who's the guy who runs Near Mint Condition. I messaged him in one of his videos, and he had said that this line of books is supposed to be evergreen, which means it would be available all the time. But some of them do seem to be out of print, and IDW did get back to me and they said, well, right now there's discussions about the possibility of reprinting some of those, but nothing's definite. So because of that uncertainty, I am going to focus my efforts on phase 2, which is a total of 12 volumes, and they're all still available. And I think volume 12 either just came out or is about to come out, so early 2021. So they're all still in print and available. So I'm going to focus my efforts there and keep my fingers crossed for possibly a reprinting of phase 1 so that I can go back and get those 8 editions and add them to my collection, because I am still quite a completionist in most cases, so it would be really nice to have those volumes in my collection. And as I'm flipping through here, I hope you're seeing some of this art. This is Livio Ramondelli. I did not know his art until the Transformers IDW, and he did some of these series. He did some covers, and then he's done different, a lot of different issues now. And it's a really unique painted style of art that I really appreciate. And I enjoy his art all the time. And now he hasn't done as many single issues recently, but he has been doing some variant covers, and whenever I see his name solicited as a variant cover artist, I will definitely choose that variant cover to go with for that particular month. Something I mentioned before about, let me see if this is going to be a good example here. The different, here we go. They present these in what they suggest as the reading order, but that's not necessarily the order in which they were printed. And the example here is, so this collects More Than Meets the Eye 9 through 13, the 2012 annual, and then Robots in Disguise 10 and 11, and that 2012 annual, plus Thundercracker, Bumblebee, and Megatron Spotlights. IDW did 2 different volumes, I don't even know, a dozen or more, what they called spotlight issues, and it either told an origin or some spotlight story on that particular character. and they did not all take place at the same time. The stories that are told take place at different points throughout this continuity, and so they intersperse these spotlight editions in the hardcover editions where they are chronologically most fitting. So they do stick some of those in there. Another reason to consider collected editions is because of things like annuals. Not everybody collects the annuals. Maybe you collect a title every month, and maybe you're just not into the annuals, but something like a collected edition will usually gather some of those other types of issues that maybe your average collector wouldn't grab, and then gives you an opportunity to have those in collected format as well. I keep coming back to this as a great 2-page spread of Metroplex there. Another thing to point out here, which is true of not just this volume, but the way they present these, IDW in this particular, let's show you the table of contents too. So you can see Thundercracker, Bumblebee, the various books, and then the creative credits there for each of those. But one of the things that IDW does in these is they give you multiple covers. You know, love it or hate it, there are so many variant covers to almost every book out there today that most of us don't get all of those covers. Even if you like those covers, you're probably going to get one or maybe two. But one of the things they've done in this collected edition is as each issue starts, they'll give you one of the covers here at the front. In this case, this is, Spotlight Thundercracker cover A. And then when you get to the end of the story, let's see if I can flip to it efficiently here. There you go. There's the Spotlight Thundercracker cover B, and that's a Ramondelli, and of course that is the one I have in single issue format, but love to have that here again in oversized art as well. So you get multiple covers for a lot of these. That's not going to be true of every hardcover, every omnibus from every publisher and every title, but something to look for is that you can get some of those additional covers, so some extra art there than you would get if you just had one copy of each single issue. All right. And there again, you got Rodimus here on the front, and then Alt Mode on the back. One more to show you. This is Transformers Phase 2, Volume 4, so we are still in order. It's just that Volume 2 that's missing. And this one, we'll flip it over. So we got Prowl on the cover, and then his Alt Mode on the back there. This one's collecting Monstrosity series. That was all done by artist Ramondelli as well. And then Robots in Disguise 12 through 18, and More Than Meets the Eye 14 through 16. So this one now starts to get just a little bit thicker than our Volume 1. So we have a little bit more collected in this one. So they do start to get a little thicker as you work your way through Phase 2, which is kind of nice because, yeah, these bigger editions just look really nice. One other thing that I haven't shown you yet is, and again, this is not going to be universally true, but IDW puts this nice ribbon in here so you can mark your place when you stop reading, and you can know where you left off and pick up reading from that point. It's another nice cover with Trypticon and Optimus there. But again, I went with Transformers because I love this art, I love these stories, I love these creative teams, I love these characters. Love, love, love. So it's lots of love going on here for me and this era of IDW Transformers. So I'm going to work on collecting all of Phase 2. I think there is a Phase 3, which I think gets into more of the shared universe era of IDW when they merged G.I. Joe and ROM and some of these other Micronauts and others that they merged and showed that they were all in the same universe, even the Visionaries and others. So we'll see if I continue in Phase 3, because again, yeah, you got to go with what you like. You got to find what's going to really appeal to you and bring you that pleasure in your collecting. And this is where I have decided to start, and hopefully this has been a helpful little introduction for you into this world of oversized hardcovers. The last thing I'll do here is I'll kind of stand this up. I'll show you these side by side. And when they all get that similar look on the spine and things, yeah, it's just a nice look. Nice way to collect these. So looking forward to having more of these in my collection.
All right, that's going to do it for me, and that's going to wrap up this video highlighting my first baby steps into collecting the oversized hardcovers, and eventually I'll show you some omnibus. I do have a couple of those on pre-order, but one's not coming out till March, the other one's not coming out, I think, until June, so those will be future videos. I hope that this has piqued your interest some, or maybe answered some questions you have. What are your thoughts? What are your comments? Do you collect single issues only? Do you collect collected editions only, or do you have a mixture? And if so, what determines if you'll buy a book in single issue format versus collected editions, and vice versa? If you're not quite ready for the fun to be done, I've got a couple hand-selected videos here for you to try out. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.